I got asked from somebody, where do I get my soil? And do I have a video out on my soil block recipe? I had mentioned in that $10 greenhouse video that I utilize soil blocks for probably like 90% of my seed starting procedures. And I do not purchase any perlite, vermilite, cellulite, jackulite, any kind of light. I don't purchase peat moss and coconut coir and stuff like that. If you know anything about me yet, on this channel and in my lifestyle, what I try to do is I try to be as self-sustaining and as self-sufficient as I possibly can with what I have. So I'm going to go ahead and share with some of you folks on how I go about making soil blocks. So if you'll just stick around just a minute, I need to get a few things collected up and we'll get started. Okay, so if you are into soil block making, or if you're thinking about it, you're going to find that there's a lot of different soil block recipes when it comes to the ingredients that you bring together all over the place, on websites, on videos and blogs and stuff of that nature. And everybody's pretty much different, but there are some common consistencies that go across the board for just about everybody. Some of those consistencies, although the recipes are different and they probably all work to some extent, there may be some better than others. I'm not sure. I'm not here to judge that one way or the other. I just know what is working for me and I continue to improve upon it. Anyway, I don't use any of those ingredients. So let's get started with mine. The first thing I need is I need a 5-gallon bucket and I need to go collect some clay. So let's go do that. I got some clay right here. I hope you can see that. It's kind of dry. It's got roots and rocks in it and everything. And that's about all I need right there. And I'm going to just drop that in my bucket. All right, the next thing I need to do is I need to put some water in here. And I'm going to put about as much water as I think I'm going to need for my batch of soil blocks. So I'll fill it up about halfway full. Okay, that's the first thing that I do is collect my clay and get it soaking in my water. So the next thing I need to do is I need to go get some compost, because that is about 90% of my base material to make my soil blocks. I built my screen here, my sieve, to fit my wheelbarrow. It's 1/4 inch. I sift it out at a 1/4 inch. And it just fits in my wheelbarrow like that. Grab my shovel and go get some compost. Alright, so this is my sifted compost. I don't know if that looks good enough for you, but I can make soil blocks just out of that. Okay, the next thing that I want to collect is I want to collect some sand off my property. So I'm going to grab my little bucket there and hand scoop, and we're going to go get a little bit of sand. Alright, what I want to do now is I'm going to incorporate some of this sand. How much? Well, I got a little, what is this, 24-ounce coffee can here. You can see what's in there. There's some pine needles, rocks, and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my little sieve here, and I'm just going to incorporate my sand into my compost here. Keep out all the bigger stuff. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my eggshell powder. I got a bunch of eggshells here that we collect, and we grind them down after we dry them or cure them or sterilize them into about the consistency of flour or talcum powder. And all I'm going to do is coat my compost with it. I don't know how much, probably somewhere around a quarter of a cup, maybe half a cup. Next thing I'm going to add is a little bit of wood ash. Alright, our next dry ingredient. This is something that I haven't figured out how to make yet, and that's Epsom salt. So I'm going to just take some here, about a handful, maybe two. I'll do 2 handfuls, or a handful and a half. I'm going to sprinkle that in there. Alright, so now that's all my dry ingredients. The Epsom salt I still have to purchase if I want to utilize it. I don't know how to make that stuff, and I don't know that I can find it on my property in another form yet. So now it's on to our wet ingredients after I mix this up real good. Okay, now what we got here is we got our clump of clay we had. I don't know how much clay that is. I just kind of take a guess at it. And the reason I got it here is in this water. I don't have any peat moss. I don't have any coconut coir, perlite, vermilite, and all those other lights in my mix thus far. I'm using compost, and I'm making my inputs into my compost. So I want to make a true soil block. So a true soil block has to have dirt, and dirt consists of sand, silt, and clay. And to make soil, we need organic material in that sand, silt, and clay, the dirt. That's what true soil is. So in order to incorporate the clay, I was trying to figure out how in the world can I do that. There's a few reasons I want to incorporate the clay. What the clay is going to serve for me is, number one, it is a great source of minerals and nutrients. Clay hangs on to and it binds to nutrients and minerals. The other thing is that it's one of the 3 components that make up dirt. And the primary reason I wanted to incorporate the clay was because of its binding characteristics. It's sticky. When it gets wet, it's sticky. So that is replacing the fibrous coconut coir and peat moss. That's the reason people utilize those. One, for their lightness and everything. but primarily because it's fibrous, and when it gets wet, that's what holds the block together. So I'm not utilizing any of that, and I'd like to have a little bit more binding effect to my soil block without my soil blocks having to be so wet and hold together. They do pretty good with just my compost. I mean, the compost is pretty amazing stuff, but I just go ahead and do this because of the other benefits of having the clay and sand. The sand is going to help keep things a little bit airy and for drainage. And because we water by wicking, when I make my soil blocks, you don't water on the top of the soil blocks, you water by wicking. That coarse sand also is going to allow that wicking process to take place in my soil block. That's what I'm thinking. So, how do I incorporate that clay without it being little balls and clumpy and everything, and get an even disbursement? So I'm going to suspend it in water. So I got it all here. I got some clumps here. I don't know if you can see. I'll go ahead and pull out my roots and stuff like that, and any big rock that I have, you know. And I'm just going to sit here with my fingers, and I'm going to massage it. All the while, I'm going to pull out some bigger rock and clumps that just aren't going very well, dissolving yet. It's solid clay. I just mush them with my fingers. That's what I'm doing here. So now, I got a pretty good amount of clay suspended in that water, just messing with it like I am right now. So what I'm going to do, I got my sieve here. This thing works great for gardening, and you're doing your own organic inputs and stuff like that. I have so many uses for these things. Number one, they fit over a 5-gallon bucket just perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this bucket down, and I'm going to stir this clay water up really good. I'm going to really stir it down, and as I got it swirling around there, I'm going to pour it into the next bucket. Now I'm really going to get this thing moving a little bit, like so, while it's moving. You're going to see clear water, and I'll show you that in this example of this bucket right here. You see, all the clay is settled down to the bottom, and you see all the water up top. And that's what this will look like right here if I were to leave it set. Alright, now if I got any liquid inputs that I want to do, and I do, now's the time I get that together. So I got me a water can, and I want you to notice, if you can here, the head of my watering can is modified a little bit. I got some bigger holes here for this process, because sometimes the clay clogs up my little holes, and I have to sit there and slosh it back. I can get it out, but it's just a little bit tedious in doing so. So obviously I got my water ready, and how much water I'm going to need is going to be determined by how moist I need my soil blocks to get a good block. First thing I'm going to put in is I'm going to put in some humic acid. I mix my humic acid at 9% strength. This is going to help the roots of the seedlings and the plants to take up the nutrients and minerals a little bit better. And I'm going to try to guesstimate here, and I'm just going to put about a teaspoon to 2 teaspoons for this, about 2 gallons. And that's it. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in about a half a cup of my own homemade liquid fertilizer that I do. So we got that. So if you want to use the fish fertilizer, now it's time to put that in. I don't have any other liquid inputs that I'm going to put in here. So I'm going to set my watering can down here. Now we're going to get our clay and water into the watering can. I got all this nice clay. I don't know if you can see that on camera, if I'm getting in the right spot here or not, but that's my clay. So what I want to do is I'm going to stir this up, just like I did when I transferred and kind of filtered it through my sieve. I'm going to get it spinning here. I want all that clay suspended in the water, and then I'm going to pour it Pour it in my watering can. I'm going to get it suspended in my watering can here. Got my fertilizer, got my humic acid in there, and it's swirling around. And then I'm going to just go ahead and start adding my water to my medium here. I've done this a few times, so I got a pretty good knack about how much I'm going to want. Take my shovel here. I'm going to start mixing all this up. If you add too much, all you got to do is leave it set in the sun, leave it set outside for a few hours, maybe even overnight, and let that moisture evaporate. And if it's too dry, you just re-add a little bit of moisture until you get the consistency that you want. That's what I do. I'm going to get my tray from my $10 greenhouse, best seed starting greenhouse in the world. Check out that video if you want. So the reason I got a 5-gallon bucket here of water is for a couple reasons. One, gives me something to wash my hands in. Two, is that when I go to make my soil blocks, especially me because I don't use peat moss or koi and perlite and things of that nature, but I don't want to have to be relying on the box store to go purchase those materials. I am not what you call a box store gardener. If that's your thing, that's your thing. I want to be more self-reliant and self-sufficient to the extent possible. So when I go make soil blocks anyway, and I've done so with, I think I've tried 2 recipes and then I started working on my own. The soil block, when you go to eject them, they tend to stick. There's a little bit of suction here and it wants to stick to the top. It probably happen here. And what I found is that if that starts happening to me, it's nice to take my seed blocker and I dip it in the water. I just swash it around here, sling it off, and I go make a couple more seed blocks. It seems to help me. So let's start. So I like to use a metal wheelbarrow. That's what I do. I push this stuff up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and jam it down just like everybody else does. And then I pull it up. And then I use my metal wheelbarrow like so. Keeping it flat, because I'm using natural stuff, and then I get a nice, clean, smooth bottom there. And then we go to eject it. Stick it under here, push down just a tad bit, and then pull straight up with your fingers. And then sometimes what I'll do is I'll rock back and forth a little bit and see if it'll release on me. See, those want to stick. Just like that. I get a little bit here, if you can see how it wants to stick right there. But that's still a decent seed block. It's going to work just fine. But if I start getting that, I just take it in the bottom of my bucket, I slosh it around, and then I clean it up for the next one. Perfect. Let me pull one up. So another thing I like to do here is I like to pick them up, okay? And what I want to do here, I want to test it out. See, I can take mine. It's not that dense. And mine here are holding together pretty good. And then what I like to do is I like to break a couple apart just to see how much resistance there is and see if I'm too compact. Now I'm going to bring this up close here and see if you can see this. Can you see that? And it still just kind of crumbles. But they are great little soil blocks. Can you see? typically will go with 40 or 52 blocks is what I'll normally put on here. Somewhere between 40 and 52. But I have 60 blocks on this one tray. Now all I got to do is sow my seeds. I got my top to my greenhouse. I got a nice flat surface here in this particular tray. This tray acts as a container as well. And here's the bottom / top to the greenhouse. Clips on, no problem. It'll hold all that weight. All them wet soil blocks even without the top. I'm big into composting. I'm big into making leaf mold. And that alone, by itself, I can make my soil blocks because I've done it. I don't know why somebody would want to start their seeds in these little 3/4 inch blocks. Yeah, you can pump out a lot of them. Whoop-de-doo. But then once they all germinate, and then you got a couple days, maybe up to 3 or 4 days, and then you got to transfer that little bitty 3/4 inch block into a 2-inch block. That's a waste of time to me. You might as well just sow them into the 2-inch blocker and from the very get-go, because you're going to have to make them anyway. I'm going to show you how I utilize this in an upcoming video. I'll make a video on how I utilize this. Okay, I guess I need to close this out. So that's how I go about making my soil blocks. And it's always developing. And I just guesstimate a lot of that stuff. You see how I went about doing it. The bottom line is, if you want to, you can make true soil blocks without having to be dependent upon those box stores. If you're into growing food and having gardening going on your property already, and you're doing so because you're kind of waking up to the detrimental effects that's taken place in our country and our world when it comes to our food supply, and you don't have any faith and security in that anymore, then you want to relieve yourself as much as possible from the grocery store. That's why a lot of us do so. And we're preppers. We're prepared to be able to feed ourselves if something were to go awry. I think it's a good idea to go along what I'm trying to do and trying to remove a lot of that dependency on the big box stores and nurseries to go get this natural organic media that my Father, the creator of all things, provides for me freely. I don't have to go purchase these things that they bag up in the stores. Ever since mankind figured out how to extract iron ore out of the earth, form it into steel, strap it to the horse, that was the beginning of the end, okay? Because not too far after that, Big Ag came on, and once people started realizing they were taking so much from the ground and they need to put back in, and somebody came along and said, hey, that's too dangerous and that's too complicated. We'll do it for you. Put it in a bag or a bottle and we'll sell it to you. And all they're doing is getting the natural ingredients from the earth to begin with. And that most of us, a lot of us, especially if we're rural and in the country, we have these things available for us. I have had success for the last 4 years. I wouldn't continue to make these soil blocks if I wasn't being successful in doing so and germinating seeds. So I'm rambling. That's how I go about doing it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. If you care to, and you know people that would like to have a little bit more self-sufficiency and self-reliance, and they'd like to get into the soil block making without being expensive, and going to purchase all these other ingredients, share this video with them. Or if you don't want to share the video, just pass on the information from your mouth to their ears, and that'll be just fine as well. Have a good day. May all your branches become full of fruit, and I'll catch you next time, folks. Hooah!